What is true is often not very useful to predict, and this has grave implications. It is commonly said that I don't want your philosophy in my science, but the alternative is even more true. I don't want your science in my philosophy. We should not, as philosophers, or as metaphysicians, or even as mathematicians, or whatever, cater to the whims of science. Science, although very long whims, is quite whimsical. It switches between different ontologies, and each time it switches between different ontologies, it presumes that the previous ontology was justified at that time, and that the current ontology is the correct ontology, and there will be no new ontologies except through science. There is quite a big problem here. Prediction does not equal truth. Let me explain. Let's say we had a theory of everything. Let's say we had a perfect predictive model. This can be represented as a state machine, where for each individual it takes the experience, or even as a collective whole, it takes the collective experiential situation, which is definite and true, and then based off of that, in previous situations, it can predict with the most accurate possible probability the next situation. Would this necessarily imply a specific ontology? No, it could never, because you could always resort to lower. It is commonly thought that atomism started as a philosophical idea. It did, and it took on a scientific predictive nature. And then it was commonly thought that it was disproven. This is not exactly the case. This specific form of atomism, where they correlated the atoms to this particular artificial construct of phenomena, of course will be disproven, because the probability that you actually assign the actual ontological structure to the arbitrary construct is quite unlikely, possibly infinitely unlikely, depending on how many possible types of ontology there are. The only possible way of getting around this is if we had a fundamental starting structure that defined a limited domain, such that for each predicted model, there was only one possible ontology. But this could only be achieved by principally philosophy and not by science. The sociological implications of this are quite interesting. I think we can see in history somewhat. In science, although philosophers have not caught on to this. Funny enough, in science over the past 400 years since Newton, scientists have slowly been detaching themselves from philosophical concepts. This is a well-known phenomenon. I would like to take it a step further, though, that instead what they should be doing is, instead of drifting towards new philosophical concepts, completely detach themselves from philosophical concepts. This has already partly been done. Take, for example, Schrodinger's wave. When Schrodinger found this function and using Planck's constant he didn't know what it meant. He didn't know the ontology. He had a vague idea of the end ontology, but he didn't know the ontology in between. This is sort of a half step, right, and can be seen more and more. However, if you look at the forefront of modern physics, there is structures that the scientists are not even considering the ontological implications of. They have no clue the ontological implications of them, and they are purely predictive in nature. The best example of this that I can think of is is called the amplitudehedron, which nobody knows the ontological implications of, but has proved extremely useful. So why don't philosophers get on this? Well, I think because our current society, with the exceptions of, interestingly enough, the upper echelons, oftentimes the upper echelons of the scientific community, or some fringe intellectuals or people who are considered crazy, conceptualizes science as something that is quote unquote the objective truth. Objective not in the sense of the original sense of objective, but objective in the sense that it's, well, everything fundamentally boils down to that. We can mess with philosophy, but science will reveal the truth. This is completely ludicrous. I have previously shown this. I don't exactly understand why this is. I am currently in the process of writing something, a script for a video that will try to, well, it's more of a historical concept that will try to sort of detail the evolution of this, but it's proved quite hard. Trying to sort of explore whether it's inherent or not, this has proved quite hard. But regardless, doing this, we should also, as philosophers, consider that we need to, as the scientists have done, liberate ourselves.